Dermatology Business Unit of Gufic Biosciences. Gufic Biosciences enjoys the trust of specialists since 1970 and is known for innovation and serving super specialist doctors through its range of high-tech products and passion for quality. In today's webinar, Dr. Shobha Reddy, an expert aesthetic dermatologist from Hyderabad, will be joined by Medical Department of Gufic Biosciences. Now I will request Dr. Debesh Das, President Domestic Formulations Gufic Biosciences, to formally welcome the delegates.
Thank you, Pankaj, and myself, Dr. Devesh Das, on behalf of Gufic Bioscience Limited, Mumbai. Do welcome our respected speaker, Dr. Shobha Reddy. I also welcome all the delegates who are attending our today's webinar from all across the country. In fact, today it is a very small initiation of our medical marketing activities where on behalf of Gufic Aesthodderm, which is the youngest SBU of Gufic Bioscience Limited, will be initiating the webinar series on different topics. Before I hand over the session to our speaker, Dr. Shobha Reddy, I'd like to give you a small brief regarding the organization. Gufic is actually known to all over the country as a leading pharmaceutical house, and we are the fastest pharmaceutical company in the country as per IMS. Some of the sectors like anti-infective, antifungal, IVF products, we are the manufacturer of most of the products in the country, and any off-patented products which is coming through different sources. Gufic is the first company to give this product to Indian pharmaceutical market. In recent COVID era, you must be knowing that remdesivir, which has been used, the 80% of the remdesivir preparation for the third parties, we manufacture, we have these facilities. Similarly, Gufic is the first Indian company, I can say in Asia Pacific, the first company who has come with its unique manufacturing of botulinum toxin for the first time in the country, and we are manufacturing and marketing few months with this molecule with a brand name of Stanox. So Gufic is having its world-class manufacturing unit in different parts of the country, in Navsari, Baroda, in other places, and we give the quality medicines to the country. Now today, our speaker, Dr. Shobha Reddy, who is an expert of aesthetic dermatology, who is from Hyderabad, and she is having more than 12 years of experience in dermatology and cosmetology. So she worked as a consultant in dermatologist in Kaya Skin Clinic over 2 years, and having many presentations from 2012 until now. She is well known. She will be taking us through the topic that effective ways of using botulinum toxin. And today we have two more dignitaries who are actually our internal medical advisor, Dr. Priyam Bhushan, who will be from Gufic side, and Dr. Adarsh Shetty, who will be our medical advisor from medical in charge from Gufic side. So after Dr. Shobha Reddy's talk, there will be a question answer session which will be taken by our panelists, Dr. Reddy, Dr. Shetty, and Dr. Priyam, and then we'll be going for a small brief of the product and followed by vote of thanks. That will be our our protocol. So with this, I hand over the session directly to our honorable speaker, Dr. Shobha Reddy. Dr. Reddy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Debesh, for the nice introduction, and thanks to the Gufic Pharmaceuticals for giving this opportunity to explain about the uses of botulinum, how effectively we can use in our aesthetic practice. Is my voice is clear?
Yes.
Is my voice is audible?
Yes,
Yes, doctor. Yes, very much clear.
Okay, I'm just sharing the screen. Yeah, so I'm going to explain how effectively we can use botulinum in our various indications of cosmetic practice. So I'm going to explain how we should know about the anatomy and function of the facial muscles before going for a botulinum use. So how the botulinum has been evolved during over a period of time, and what is the pharmacology of botulinum and types, and what is the importance of reconstitution, especially in how it is going to act, and what is the importance of reconstitution in the mode of action, and what are the contraindications where we can't give botulinum, and what are the common drugs where we can't give along with the botulinum, and how effectively we can use botulinum in upper third, middle third, and lower third. And there are some common mistakes we generally will do even with a proper expert also. So try to avoid how we can avoid those common mistakes, and what are the undesired effects we'll get out of botulinum use. So coming to the history, today if you see, according to the global market calculation, botulinum is almost it's giving a business of 3 million till 2018, just only purely because of the cosmetic application. So coming to the history, first Muller is the first person who coined the term botulism, which is nothing but sausage poisoning, and this is followed by discovery of Clostridium botulinum bacteria by Belgium scientist, that is Ermenchev. And but Dr. Edward Sands is the first person who isolated botulinum toxin in the crystal clear crystalline form. So thereafter, Kerner is a person who hypothesized that it can be used therapeutically to treat the disease caused by overactive nervous system. And thereafter, there are so many FDA approvals came. The first indication is the strabismus and blepharospasm, who in the year 1989, there the Carthus couple who incidentally found that when they are giving injections for the blepharospasm, there is a incidental improvement of glabellar lines. So this is the indication which has approved, the first cosmetic indication approved in the year 2002. There are some other medical indications which are approved in the later years, such as cervical dystonia, axillary hyperhidrosis, migraine, and spasticity in the later years. The one common indication which we generally use very commonly is crow's feet, that is lateral loft lines, which has been approved in year 2013. Coming to the structure, we should know about the structure properly to understand the function. So it is a dipeptide chain with heavy and light chain. They are linked together by disulfide bond. This disulfide bond is heat labile, hence we need to maintain the correct temperature. So here the light chain acts as zinc endopeptidase with a proteolytic activity, whereas heavy chain acts as a high selectivity with the synaptic receptors. So as already explained, disulfide bond is a heat labile bond. So then that's why we need to maintain the correct temperature. That's why even the reconstitution also we need to do very carefully to preserve its integrity. And regarding the storage, before reconstitution, we need to keep in the freezer. After reconstitution, for the better efficacy, we need to keep in between 2 to 8 degrees temperature. So coming to the botulinum types and its pharmacology, there are 4 types of botulinum, that is Ona-botulinum, Inco-botulinum, Ebo, and Remo. Out of these 4, Ona-botulinum, Inco-botulinum, Ebo-botulinum are type A, whereas Riboflavin is type B. And why we should know about these 4 types is because they are not interchangeable ones. And coming to the Ona and Inco-botulinum, clinical conversion rate is same, that is 1:1. But coming to the Ebo-botulinum, we need to use 2.5 times more than Ona-botulinum. And one specific for Inco-botulinum is it's free of hemagglutinin proteins which are present in other types. Hence, we should know about the type, what type of botulinum we are using. And coming to the antigenetically distinct types, they range from A to G. In this, A is the most common type, followed by B type. So B is more generally used in other medical indications. Coming to the standard vial, what we use is a 100 units vial, which contains 4.8 nanograms of neurotoxin with 0.5 milligrams of human albumin and 0.9 grams of sodium chloride. So what is the importance of reconstitution? See, why the reconstitution should be done very gently, because if you do fastly, it may result in foaming. This will denaturate the toxins. Hence, we have to do very gently to avoid foaming and bubbling. So coming to the dilution ranges from 1 to 5 ml. In this, if you see, it is like a physician choice, but the standard dilution is around 2.5 ml for 100 units, 1.25 ml for the 50 units. And generally, as per the expertise and as per the studies, higher concentration is for the better placement of the toxin, lower concentrations for the better spread of the toxin. And if you see, around each injection point, the toxin spread will be around 2.5 to 3 centimeters. And we know the action will start within 24 hours, but depending upon the type of botulinum we are using, it may range, it may extend up to 72 hours also. The peak will be within 1 or 2 weeks, lasting around 3 to 4 months. And coming to the safe therapeutic levels, if you see the toxicity levels, it is around 40 units per kg. That is almost 2,500 to 3,000 units per 3,000 units. So if you see the amount what we are using in cosmetodermatology is not more than 100 units, sometimes up to 100 to 300 in case of axillary hyperhidrosis. In that way, we can see it's absolutely safe, and because we are using very minimal doses. That's why we call it as a miracle toxin, because it has a site specific action. At the same time, we are using, and it has a very temporary action. So coming to the site specificity, if you see in the cosmetic indications, as it is working on the neuromuscular junction, whereas in other indications such as neurological problem, where it works around, at the autonomic ganglia and the postganglionic parasympathetic and sympathetic nerve endings. And one interesting thing, why there is delay in action. See, if you see, the action will start after 24 hours, ranges up to till third day of action. Maybe because of this is a time taken for the depletion of the acetylcholine storage present at the presynaptic motor end plates. And why it is temporary? Because this is a time taken for the new axonal sprout formation, which may be around ranges from 3 to 6 months, which will helps in the re-establishment of the neurogenesis pathway. So why there is efficacy variability? Although we are giving botulinum, there is a efficacy variability will be depend upon the formulation what we are using, what is the diffusion profile we are using, and what is the protein load. See, if you see incobotulinum, it is almost free of hemagglutinin. That's why the efficacy is more with incobotulinum compared to onabotulinum, because of maybe even the hemagglutinin proteins present in low concentration in onabotulinum, it is going to affect to some extent. And what are the post-treatment protocols we are following? That is a massage, avoid bending, all those things. And volume of injection, whether you are using high concentration or low concentration. And they're coming to the reconstitution solution. Generally, we use a non-preservative solution, but some studies or some clinical expertise, they're just explaining that even the preservative saline may act as may give a anesthetic effect, and it's a sterile thing. And the last but not least is a neutralizing antibodies, although it is very least in dermatology practice. But people who don't respond to the botulinum, we should think about the neutralizing antibodies. Sometimes they don't respond in the first injection only. We need to term it as a primary non-responders. And some people, they respond in the first session, they're followed by non-responding in the later sessions. Maybe we should think about the neutralizing antibodies. So coming to the mode of action, first step is a binding, where the toxin will bind to the receptor by C-terminal of the heavy chain, followed by internalization. This will be like a endocytosis of the by forming vesicle with a toxin and receptor complex, which is an energy-dependent process. Then followed by translocation. Here the disulfide bond is cleaved, and the light chain is released into the cytoplasm of the nerve terminal. So then this is followed by blocking. Here mainly the light chain will cleaves a SNAP25, thereby blocking the docking of acetylcholine vesicles, thereby blocking the release of acetylcholine from the vesicle. So if you see in this picture, The first picture without botulinum, you can see, you can appreciate here three types of proteins. That's snare protein, that is SNAP25, syntaxin, and synaptobravin. All these are able to dock the acetylcholine vesicle, thereby able to cause a muscle cell to contract. But after giving botulinum, if you see, the light chain blocks the cleaves the snare proteins, thereby unable to dock the acetylcholine vesicle. That's why muscle is not able to contract. This is a main mechanism. The concept behind giving botulinum is this one. So coming to the facial muscles, we know wrinkles occurs due to the repeated and habitual contraction of the facial muscles, and these hyperfunctioning muscles results in some anesthetic and unpleasing looks such as anger, tired, anxious, and sad look. So treating this concern gives a very pleased and aesthetic looks. That's why botulinum is important. So coming to the mimic muscles, why we'll call mimic muscles, as because they have a unique attachment to the SMAS, that is superficial muscular aponeurotic system, not to the bone, unlike the other muscles on the body. Hence, whenever you contract the muscle, it results in the movement of the skin on the face, resulting in the facial expressions. And one more unique thing in facial muscles, that they are arranged in opposite directions. In that way, it is able to balance upside down movements, medial and lateral, sphincter opening and closing movements, and elevating and depressor actions. Hence, once one muscle is weakened, other muscle will take over its action by its antagonist action, resulting in the desired and undesired effects. So this can be well explained by this picture. This is nothing but botulinum rebalancing. If you see in the first picture, if you give in a judicious way botulinum, able to rebalance both the elevator and depressor actions, or agonist and antagonist action. But if you overdose, or if you give in a wrong muscle, because of the over relaxation of the one muscle, it will be taken over by other muscle, which results in over or undesired effects of the botulinum. So this picture is very important to understand botulinum, how judiciously we need to go botulinum. So coming to the depth of injections, we know two planes, that is X plane and Y plane. Apart from this, one more plane is important, that is a depth, that is a muscle depth. So always when we are giving botulinum, go in a three-dimensional approach. So based on the depth, we have to divide into deeper injections, medium, and superficial. So deeper injections, here the needle will go up to 6 to 10 mm, that is touching onto the periosteum. So the deep injections, when we see on the face, they are masseter muscle, mentalis, and corrugator. So why we have to give in the masseter? Because here comes the insertion importance, because all these muscles are inserted onto the bone. But in even the mentalis, one more exception for the mentalis, even though mentalis is a very thin muscle, as it lies just beneath the fat, so we have to give deep injections to attack the mentalis. That's why the depth understanding is very important. Coming to the medium depth, this is around 2 to 5 mm bevel needle depth, just placing the botulinum injection under the skin, overlying the muscle. So this is for the platysma muscle. Although platysma is a superficial muscle, we need to give medium depth. This one I will explain in the next slide. And superficial, we just raise the blade with a bevel of needle to give the subtle results, or a very, very desirable results, especially for the frontalis and for the nasalis muscle. So the first indication is a glabella. Glabella is nothing but a median elevation between the two superciliary arches. We know there are these glabella are both horizontal and vertical glabellar lines, but there are 5 types of glabella patterns, such as U pattern, V pattern, 11, X, and pi pattern. One more pattern which is seen in Indian patients is I pattern. So the pattern of glabella varies from person to person, and the target muscles here are corrugator supercilii, procerus, and depressor supercilii. So apart from these 3 muscles, there are some other fibers of orbicularis oculi, even the frontalis fibers in the downside, and the nasalis in the medial side may result in glabellar frown lines. That is not in every case, in few cases. So if you see in this picture, there are different types of glabellar patterns. One is fan shaped, which may result in there because of the corrugator bundle shape, like a fan shape, which may result in hockey shaped glabellar lines. And type 2 is a rectangular pattern, which may result in a Leban pattern type of glabellar lines. Type 3 is a ribbon, which is unusual, but we need to, this is present in thinner skin people. So technique here is either we have to go for 3 or 5 injection point depending upon the depth and extent of the muscle. So the key points when we are injecting the glabella, we need to examine the facial expression both during the rest and animation, always palpate the muscle during the contraction, and assess the brow position and check for the asymmetry before giving the injections. And remember, don't completely paralyze the muscle, and always consider the person's expectations. And one important thing I want to note here is never consider eyebrow as a landmark. Always palpate the superior orbital rim before giving injection into the glabella to avoid brotosis. So coming to the injection point, for the corrugator, you have to give deep injection to target the depressor supercilii, and the needle should be upward and laterally away from the globe, and it should be superior to the orbital rim. And once you reach superiorly, if you think the fibers are extending laterally, we can give laterally very superficial injection just above the eyebrow. So coming to the procedure, which lies in between the glabella, it is a pyramidal muscle. It originates from the nasal bone, insert into the glabella. So we know we'll give in the center point of X line drawn from inner canthus to the contralateral inner canthus to the inner brows. And if the procedure is extending just behind above the X line, we need to give one more point above the first point. So depressor supercilii, whenever we are injecting the corrugator, we need to target the depressor supercilii also, because the muscle lies very deep and it originates from the medial orbital rim near the lacrimal bone, and it is inserted inferior to the corrugator. So whenever you are targeting the corrugator, always keep in mind that we need to inject into the depressor supercilii also. So the dose here is 20 to 40 units, and some people, even after injection, some people we can appreciate some vertical lines just extending above the eyebrow. So maybe because of the contraction of the horizontal fibers of orbicular sacral lying above the eye rim. So in those cases, we need to give 1 or 2 units just above the rim to target the orbicular sacral. But when you are giving this part, we should be very careful to avoid the ptosis. So how we can avoid the ptosis? Just lying above the orbital rim, basically to avoid diffusion into the LPS muscle, that is levator palpebrae superioris muscle. And we know ptosis, once it occurs, if we can't reverse this one, so once lid ptosis or brotosis, we can give mydriatic agents such as phenylephrine, generally 1 to 3 drops 3 times daily, to stimulate the underlying molar muscle, which helps in to elevate the upper eyelid. And the apraclorin, which is not available very easily in India, and this better not to give apraclorin in the earlier cases. Basically, it may unmask the glaucoma. So better go for mydriatic drops. And coming to the next common indication, that is transverse forehead lines. So we know transverse forehead lines are caused by the frontalis. Basically, the frontalis function is mainly to raise the eyebrow, which may result in transverse wrinkle, which give a surprise look. That's why we will call frontalis as a surprise muscle. Always remember, we need to weaken the muscle, not to paralyze the muscle, because the function of the forehead frontalis is to keep the brow in a neutral position and give in a smaller doses. So we know frontalis, as it raising the eyebrows, we consider it as an antagonist of eyebrow depressor, and it originates from the Galea aponeurotica, not from the bone. Hence, we need to give very superficial injections, insert into the skin of the eyebrow and glabella muscles. And coming to the action part, we can divide frontalis fibers as superior fibers and inferior fibers. Superior fibers results in the transverse line by pulling the muscle perpendicular to the lines. So that's why we call it as an animation muscle also. And coming to the inferior fibers, this muscle will keep the eyebrow in a position by maintaining the resting tension. So this can be appreciated if you see in Bell's palsy patients, there is a complete brow drop, maybe because of the complete paralysis of the frontalis. Hence, we need to just weaken the muscle, not to completely paralyze the frontalis. See, if you see the frontalis muscle fibers also, they vary from person to person. Type 1, if you see, extending all over the forehead, fully formed bellies all over the forehead, whereas type 2 is like a wing-shaped bellies, forming a V-shaped bellies, giving an appearance of W shape. And type 3 is present only on the central part, just extending only on the medial half of the orbit. Type 4 is a little unusual, but in some people may present over the eyebrows, just above the superior orbital limb, with no fibers in between. So coming to the injection technique, we can say frontalis is a tricky muscle. So like a game of chess, we need to balance the frontalis muscle with the glabella and orbital muscle to keep the brow in neutral position. So always when you are injecting the frontalis, keep in mind about the brow position. So standard dose is 15 to 20 units, either in 1 row or 2 rows. And as it is attached to the underlying periosteum, we need to just raise the superficial blebs, not to have the pain. And further, it also helps in the better diffusion of the muscle, because the muscle is very thin and widely distributed. So and give one more important thing is always give 1 or 2 centimeters above the orbital rim, thereby and just lateral to the mid-pupillary line, so thereby avoiding the brotosis complication. So how best we can give naturals, so that we can avoid the frozen look or Spock eyebrows, ptosis, and telltale signs of new wrinkles. Always distribute the injection points according to the forehead lines in the animation, whether present on the upper part, middle part, or the lower part, and depending upon the size of the forehead. See, if you see the people forehead size, some people may have a large forehead, some people have a small, and some people have average. So, and apart from this, check the muscle function, whether it is a kinetic. In kinetic people, they respond much better way, whereas in hyperkinetic people, they need more doses. And whereas in hypertonic people, although they respond with botulinum injection, the weaning of effect for botulinum toxin is very fast. So for these people, we need to explain that the instead of taking the injection every 3 months, they have to come back soon, because of their hypertonicity, the muscle function will weans off so fastly. So hence, we need to check the function before giving the injections, and always assess the brow and lid ptosis, especially in the elderly people who underwent brow surgery previously. And there is a gender difference. Although it is a personal choice, generally we consider more aesthetic flat eyebrows in males, arched eyebrows in females, and check for the eyebrow asymmetry before giving frontalis injections. That's why pre-operative photographic consent documentation is very, very important, because we know that no faces are completely symmetric. Only 15% of people have complete symmetry. So if there is a gross asymmetry, we can document it and we can show them, especially in a dissatisfied persons. Coming to the Spock eyebrows, which is very unpleasant and very unaesthetic outcome, what we get out of frontalis injections. This occurs mainly when we confine the injections in the medial in the medial part of the forehead, thinking that the medial fibers are when you see, if you most of the people part, maybe because of the fibrous nature of the frontalis muscle. So in those people, just confining injection in the medial part may result in the lateral frontalis activation, resulting in the Jack Nicholson or a vacant look or Spock look appearance. So how we can correct this one here? Just give injections 1 or 2 points at the level of maximum contraction, where you can see once call them back and see the contraction, tell them to animate, just raise the eyebrows, you check the points where it is maximally contracted, choose those points and give on those points, you can give 1 or 2 units if you see that Spock eyebrows. And one more unusual thing, that is new wrinkles. If you see in the first picture, there are new lines will be present above the eyebrow. This may be because of the extension of the frontalis, just sometimes even beyond the temporal fusure lines also. So in those things, we need to extend the injection points lateral and near to the hairline. Remember, it should be near to the hairline, so that we can avoid the dangerous area just lying above the orbital rim. So coming to the next indication, that is crow's feet. We know crow's feet occurs due to hyperactive portion of the orbicularis part of orbital part of the orbicularis oculi. But in some people, especially in the thin skin people and Western people, it may occur because of the zygomaticus major overaction, even with the risorius also. So coming to the orbicularis, we know orbital part we will target, and palpebral part will taken care by the ophthalmologist, which generally they will give in the pre-tarsal part. So one more important thing I want to note here is how we can differentiate lines formed by the orbicularis oculi and the zygomaticus muscle. See, if you see, instead of asking the person to smile, tell the person to close as tightly as they can, so that we can appreciate the lines which are formed because of the orbicularis oculi, not because of the zygomaticus muscle. So coming to the technique, standard technique, we know we have to give very superficial injection, just 1 centimeter lateral to the orbital rim at 3 signs above and below point, below the, so to target the lateral orbicularis oculi. Modified technique I will explain in the next slides. So dose we generally will give 12 to 15 units, both together sides. So tips here is always it should be 1 centimeter lateral to the orbital rim, so that we can avoid extraocular muscles or small muscles of the eye. So thereby we are able to avoid eye complications such as strabismus and diplopia. And this will be generally done by ophthalmologists to widen the aperture, that is palpebral aperture. To the person who want a wider eyes, we can give 2 units in the pre-tarsal part of the orbicularis oculi, just here near the midpupillary line. But this is like a off-label indication, and we need to take special consent for that, because sometimes what happens, there may be exacerbation of the eye bags also. So better to be not avoid, try to avoid this point. Only if the persons ask for the wider eyes, we need to give after the consent documentation. And always avoid injection just below the zygomatic arch. Thereby we are able to avoid the lip ptosis and cheek ptosis by avoiding the zygomaticus major muscle. So this is a standard technique I explained already. This is a modified technique. Here, if you see the lines extending just below the lateral canthus, we need to extend the points little down. So here, if you see the second and third point, second is like a superior inferior point, and first is like an anterior posterior point. So we need to extend little down from the first point. So coming to the crow's feet, like frontalis and even the glabella lines, even the crow's feet also different types. They vary from person to person. If you see in the first picture, full fan, they extend from the above to middle completely. Whereas if you see in the lower fan, just extending below the lateral canthus, and in the central fan, just present just in the lateral part of the lateral canthus. And if you see down, only will see in the above, only see above in the just above the lateral canthus. So now we know the term from where the crow's feet came. So coming to the ideal brow, here the highest point should be just above the lateral arch, with the medial and lateral brow should be on the same horizontal line. So if you scale it, it is 1 millimeter above the mid-pupillary line and 4.8 millimeters above the lateral canthus. So if you so brow position is always maintained by the balanced action of the frontalis, which is an elevator, and brow depressors such as corrugate glabellar muscles in the medial part. That's why whenever you treat the glabellar muscle, we can call it as a medial brow lift also. And when you treat in the lateral part, where we are injecting into the lateral part of the orbicularis oculi in the just above the superior orbital rim, this is called a lateral brow lift. Hence, we call it as a artistic treatment. All the points are not for every person. If you see only lateral ptosis, we have to just target the lateral part. If you see only medial brow, we need to just target the glabellar muscle. Generally, we'll see lateral ptosis very common in the old age people, maybe because of the gravitational descent of the temporal tissue present over the above the in the forehead, and because of the continuous downward force of the glabellar muscle. So, and sometimes even the brotosis may happen because of the partial weakening of the frontalis without giving the glabella injections. So always counsel the person to take both frontalis and glabella injection together to avoid this complication. And technique here, I already explained, giving into the medial and lateral part depending upon the ptosis extent. And the concept here is we are giving, by this relaxation of the orbicularis part, we are able to give an unopposed action of the LPA radius and molar muscle present underneath it. And one more added benefit, when you give the brow lift, it gives a wide aperture size. It's a increase of aperture size. So coming to the middle muscles, such as middle third face, one is a nasalis muscle. Generally, nasalis muscle, it's person won't ask for the nasalis muscle injection. We will treat them because to give a better look for the frown lines, to soften the frown lines much better way. So here the muscle is a nasalis muscle. So nasalis has two parts, transverse part and compressor part. Generally will take care of these two things to treat the nasalis transverse line. So originates from the maxilla, insert onto the bridge of the nose. And so action, it compresses the nostrils and thereby giving the transverse line on the bridge of the nose, especially people are when they are smiling. So one thing here, when you are giving the middle third, always give very less units and very close medial to not progressing laterally. So here, if you see in 2 to 4 units each side, sometimes even on the central point also. And one important thing is always avoid massage in the middle third of the face, and that is nasalis muscle. Because because it may leads to diffusion into the surrounding muscles. And bunny lines may be present even in the aging skin. Try not to treat the aging skin bunny lines because they are not going to improve by the botulinum injections. And sometimes even bunny lines may occur as a part of treatment of glabella, maybe because of the hyperactivation of the nasalis muscle. And injection points, I told, just try to be medial, not extend to lateral points. And if you see, next is a gummy smile. Even the gummy smile also, person won't come and ask treat for the gummy smile. Generally, they will tell that my smile is not looking good whenever they are taking the pictures. Maybe basically exposure of the gums whenever they are smiling. So this gingival exposure, if it is more than 3 mm, it's considered as a gummy smile, and it is a little bit unpleasant and unaesthetic. So this occurs mainly, it is of two types. One is anterior gummy smile and second is a posterior gummy smile. So anterior gummy smile occurs basically hyperactivation of the levator labial superior iliac nasal present just beside the nasalis muscle, and sometimes the lines may the gummy smile may be more than 3 mm and extending just beside the posterior to the canine teeth also. Here it is because of the hyperactivation of the zygomaticus muscle. So the concept here is try to not to expose the gingiva or gums whenever they are smiling. So the target muscle here is the levator labial superior iliac nasal. So always choose one point just lateral to the nasolabial fold. Give one injection just 1 centimeter lateral to the nasolabial fold. If you see posterior gummy smile, you have to give one more point just 2 centimeter lateral to the first point. But whenever you are giving injection, it should be very superficial, not to attack the underlying levator angular oris muscle, which is a deep muscle. So hence we need to just raise a superficial bleb in the nasolabial fold, not to target the levator angular oris muscle, which may create the asymmetric smile. So smile asymmetry occurs maybe because of LAO involvement when you give too low injections and too deep injections. If you go too high injections, may result in the medial rectus involvement, which may result in epiphora. And like the nasalis, we need to avoid massage in the downward direction, so to avoid further complications. So coming to the lower face indications. So lower face, if you see, what we'll treat is a mouth frown. We call it as a marionette lines. The name, it came from the puppet. If you see in this picture, you can see the down lines just extending beside the corner of the mouth, giving a very sad look, angry face or grimace look. So the target muscle here is a DAO, that is depressor angularis oris muscle, which present on either side of the corner of the mouth, which results in the depressing the corner of the mouth, which gives a sad or angry face even if they don't do the expression also. So how we can identify this muscle? DAO muscle identification is a little bit difficult thing, and ask the patient to pull down the corner of the mouth or to show the inferior tooth or to pout their lower lip, so that we can identify we can feel the DAO bulk. So DAO muscle, it's like a fan shaped muscle just present beside the corner of the mouth. And if coming to the origin, It originates from the angle of the mandible along with the platysma and insert into the risorius and orbicularis oris near the modulus. As it is a fan-shaped muscle, the medial portion will extend, medial side will extend to DLI and lateral side will extend to risorius and zygomaticus muscle. So we should be very careful when we are giving the DAO muscle, because we should not attack the DLI muscle, which may result in the drooling of secretion from the mouth, or maybe decreased function of DLI muscle also. And if you attack the risorius, it may result in asymmetric smile. And too high injections may involve the orbicularis oris, which may result in oral incompetence. So should be used very less units, and always. So how we can how can we point out the injection site? Basically, draw one line from nasolabial fold where it meets the jawline. That will be around 1 centimeters lateral and inferior to the oral commissure, and give 1 unit on each side. Say 1 point on each side. Try to confine to 2 to 5 units on each side. And when you are giving DAO muscle, it also targets the mentalis muscle also. Thereby, we are able to target the mentalis. So in this way, we can reduce the hyperfunction of the mentalis also. So when you give the DAO muscle, how it is going to elevate the corner of the mouth is basically we are able to produce the unopposed elevator action of the zygomaticus and levator muscle present above it. So we are just using the botulinum rebalancing action here. Thereby, we are antagonizing the elevator action of the zygomaticus and LAO muscles. So coming to the next indication, this is a square jaw masseter hypertrophy. We know it is occurs because of the masseter hypertrophy, and this muscle originated from the zygomatic bone and anterior two-thirds of the zygomatic arch, and it is inserted into the angle of the mandible and the lateramus of the mandible. And masseter has two components. One is superficial and deep, which will help to elevate the jaw and chewing movements. And how will inject? Always tell the person to clench the teeth, palpate the muscle, draw the anterior and posterior border, and afterwards draw one line extending from the tragus of the ear to the corner of the mouth. Thereby, we can able to divide the muscle below that one into 4 quadrants and choose 3 or 5 injection points depending upon the bulk of the muscle, and always give the injection deep into the periosteum, and so the needle depth should be halfway, or even sometimes in the very bulk muscles we can go up to 3/4 of the injection. And dose will be varies from male to female, that is ranging from 30 to 40 units. So here the difficulties when we face when we are giving masseter injection is basically we should know about the modulus, which is present just above the corner, just lateral to the corner of the mouth. If you see in this diagram, modulus is above muscles are levator angular oris muscle and zygomaticus major muscles, and in the lateral is the risorius muscle, down part is the orbicularis oris and DAO muscle. See, that's why whenever you are giving the masseter, it's always should be deep. Why? Because if you give superficial injection, you may inject into risorius muscle, because risorius originates just from the superficial fascia of the masseter and parotid fascia present here. So always give deep injections when you are giving the masseter. Otherwise, it may result in a crooked smile appearance or asymmetric smile. So that's why the deep injections are very, very important in giving in the masseter. And because when we are targeting only superficial part, this may result in bottom muscle movement, results in abnormal animal movements like chipmunk appearance. And sometimes if you give overdose, it may result in difficulty in chewing. And coming to the last indication, that is necklines, and that is jaw reshaping. Here the target muscle is the platysma. See, platysma is both a muscle of facial expression and also neck muscle. So how the platysma is originated from both pectoralis and deltoid fascia. Like risorius, it is not originated from the bone. So we have to be very careful when we are giving injections into the platysma muscle. And it is inserted into, along with the anterior fibers, interlace with the opposite side and insert into the mandible, and at the level of modulus, it insert into the angle of mouth and DAO also. And some main action here, it's able to depress the lower jaw and partial opening of the mouth. So whenever we are targeting the platysma, thereby we are relaxing the platysma. So elevator function will take over and helps to elevate the jaw, and at the same time try to helps in the lower clear cut definition of the neck, the jawline. So the generally platysmal bands will be more prominent as the age progresses. So coming to the injection techniques, ask the person to clench the teeth and grasp the platysmal band, and with a thumb and index finger at with a gap of 1 to 1.5 centimeters, progress from the jawline extend up to the clavicle. 6 points along the jawline extend up to the clavicle. So in the previous slide, I told about the depth of the injection, why it is medium, why it has to be medium depth, why not it is superficial, because even though it is a superficial muscle, when you are giving the injection, it should be medium depth, so that it won't diffuse into the deeper muscles. At the same time, it won't diffuse in the above part. So that's why we have to pinch the muscle, give the injections in the animation. So that's why we have to give the injections in animation mode only. And so that's why giving in the choosing the person for platysma is very important. Always choose a person who has a prominent platysmal bands only, and who have a good cervical skin elasticity with a minimal fat descent, and always treat consider it as an adjuvant to the facelift surgery, not as a whole treatment. So what are the difficulties generally we see is neck weakness, dysphonia, and dysphagia. What are the contraindications? We know all these things, but out of all these things, I want to absolute contraindication is the local infections and hypersensitivity to albumin and botulinum. And always try to avoid frontalis injections in the elderly people, because they use the frontalis muscle to elevate the brow, which I explained in the previous slides. And undesired effects, all those are temporary. It will go, but one thing, if you touch the periosteum whenever you are giving the glabella and forehead injections, it may result in headache. So in those cases, we tell them to take the analgesics for the next 2 to 3 weeks after the injection. And ectropion and ptosis will happen whenever you are targeting the glabella and frontalis and you're giving excess dose and not following the standard guidelines. And asymmetry is a very undesirable complication. That's why preoperative photographic documentation is very, very important. And coming to the immunogenicity, this is very rare in dermatology. Why? Because the dose compared to neurology, will use very less dose, and treatment interval is almost more than 3 months, and there is no booster dose, unlike the neurological indications. So the common errors we should know where we can, so that we can avoid what we can't do, what we should not do. So that first one is excessively giving high dose, which may gives a lack of expression as a vacant look, or sometimes not knowing about the contraction pattern of the muscle, which may result very unnatural appearance. And sometimes even if you are targeting one muscles, unknowingly diffusion into the surrounding muscles may result in unnatural telltale signs of new wrinkles. And one more thing, whenever you are injecting the corrugator, if you don't inject too deeply, it may inject into the frontalis, which may give the Mephisto look or a surprise look. And one more, and people try to avoid in those people who use the frontalis to raise their eyelids, such as in case of brow and lid ptosis. And whenever if the injecting the crow's feet too low may result in the exacerbation of the eye bags. Even if the lines are extending below, try to avoid those injections, because this may lead to exacerbation of the under eye bags. So to conclude, botulinum is a very powerful neurotoxin. It will cause a disuse atrophy of the muscle. Thereby, we are able to increase the duration of the injections, and we are able to decrease the dose of injection also. And always remember the muscle pattern, its size, and the dynamic action. And one more advantage with the botulinum is it has a mood improving effect. Basically, it is able to improve the glabellar frown lines. At the same time, if you treat crow's feet conservatively, basically not to treat all the crow's feet together, thereby we are able to maintain the natural smile which will happen with the eyes, which we call as Duchenne smile. So Always, even the crow's feet also don't treat completely, which may give a vacant look or unnatural smile. And so, to conclude, I can say being beautiful is nothing but feeling beautiful. That's why we need to treat in a 4-dimensional approach. That is, the fourth dimension is being the emotional connection to the expressions. Thereby, we can give natural look even with the bottom, not giving it like an unnatural look. Some celebrities, if you see, after taking the bottom, they will give a very vacant, unnatural look. So try to avoid those things so that we can improve the compliance for the. They can come back and take because nobody does, no person doesn't like giving a natural look or going back like a vacant look. So try to go in a 4-dimensional approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy. Your presentation was really, really comprehensive. You've completed all of these practical tips to use botulinum toxin. Now, at this point, I am Dr. Priyam Bhushan, and along with Dr. Adarsh Shetty, we will be discussing with you some of the questions that have come in from all of our attendees, and we've had quite a few questions. So I'll give you them one by one, and we can address them. Is that okay?
Yes.
Lovely. So the first question by Dr. Ashit Shah is there any way to relax the frontalis muscle partially or only superficially muscles to reduce the fine lines?
Yeah, it's a good question. Always, if you see the frontalis lines, check the lines whenever in the animation, whether present only in the upper part, middle part, or lower part. If they're present only in the upper part, try to give injections only in one line. That should be above always follow the standard guidelines. It should be 2 centimeters above the orbital line, and go only confined to one part and along with the anti-spoking points. So we can give very subtle units and only one line we can give.
Okay, lovely. The second question is, we've been asked, what will happen if you dilute it with water for injection?
Yeah, actually, we should not use water because water is not a sterile thing. And at the same time, even if you use sterile water also, it may cause stinging sensation. So generally, to avoid the stinging sensation, we'll use normal saline, which has some anesthetic effect. So generally, we'll prefer a reconstitution solution as a normal saline only.
Okay. So normal saline is the only one that we should be using to dilute. Okay. The next question is from Dr. Kshitij Goel, who is asking, please tell the number of units at each injection site.
Frontalis 20 units, and for the glabella 20 to 40 units depending upon the gender and depending upon the muscle depth. For the crow's feet 12 to 15 units, and for the nasalis 2 to 4 units. That also confined to a lower doses. And why? Because in the middle third we have to be very low dose is always better, and the gummy smile is 2 to 4 units. Whereas coming to the DAO muzzle, it is around maximum 2 to 5 units, whereas in masseter 30 to 40 units depending upon the gender and depending upon the bulk of the muzzle. And coming to the platysma and the neckline, 15 to 20 units or 15 to 30 units depending upon the neck sagging and even the platysmal band depth. So always divide into 4 to 5 points here and extending 3 points along the platysmal bands. And one thing, mentalis, two units are with one central point, depending on the bulk of the mentalis. And gummy smile also only 2 to 4, confined to 1 to 2 units only.
Okay, lovely. That's a good coverage of all of the questions. One more question I have is from Dr. Madhavi, who asks, experience of Botox to nose indications, any complications have you faced till now?
Nose means nasal bunny lines you are asking?
Yes, anywhere on the nose, any complications?
Yeah, actually,
that you have faced?
Giving in the nasalis is a very tricky thing because the muzzle hairs are very closely approximated. If you see the anatomy, nasal is followed by LLS, LLSN, LLS, and zygomaticus. So whenever you are giving the nasalis, try to be very medial and should not go laterally. may actually, if you give, no, there is sometimes, because I have not given so many injections for the nasalis because I don't have that much experience, but I can say always confined to the medial part, because this is safer side. We know that nasalis will stay in this part only, it won't extend beyond this point. And we know LLSSN and LL, all the lip elevator muscles and which are linked to the lip, they are present, definitely present just beside this one. So always try to be medial in whenever you are giving the nasalis, and confine medial, very less units, avoid massage.
Okay, great. We have also been asked by a doctor, what is Nefertiti lift?
Yeah, Nefertiti is an Egyptian beautiful woman. She has a long neck with a very clearly defined jawline. That one I explained as a neck reshaping or jaw reshaping. Here we are targeting not only the platysma, we are targeting the lower muscles of DAO. So we are targeting the DAO, we are targeting the platysma also. So basically we are able to relax the depressors of the mandible, and at the same time depressors of the neck also. So we are targeting the platysma on the lateral side, and to some extent DAO at this part. But one thing when we are giving here, we should one thing I missed in my presentation, we should not extend beyond the anterior border of the DLI line, because once you extend this part, it may involve the DLI muscle. So always behind that point, and by this way we are just relaxing the platysma and few fibers of the DAO. Thereby we are stimulating the elevator function of the LAO muscle. So we are just pulling above, just like it's like a adjuvant of facelift. It's not a complete treatment for the neck reshaping, creating the jaw. It's nothing but creating the perfect jaw.
Okay.
Any post-operative care do you advise, or do you do any specific treatment after the procedure?
Your voice is very feeble, Adarsh.
Yeah, any post-operative care or the precautions you'll advise for the patient?
Dr. Adarsh, your voice is very feeble. I think Dr. Priyam, you can ask.
Yeah, what Dr. Adarsh just asked is any post-operative care or precautions to be advised to the patient?
Yeah. Post-operative care, generally will tell whatever the guidelines, whatever the clinical expert, whatever the studies till now happened, avoid massage, basically to avoid unnecessary diffusion into the undesired muscles, and avoid bending. That even bending also, as such, there is no proven studies that bending is going to affect that one, because generally if you see the botulinum mode of action, it will take maximum within 4 hours a toxin uptake will happen with the muscle. So all this doesn't have any proven results, but only thing is try to avoid the massage, try to avoid the bending, so and try to avoid the exercise after from 1 to 3 days after the procedure, so that we can give the best results, generally to avoid the undesired effects.
Okay. Is there any medication that the patients are not supposed to take, or before or after the procedure?
Yeah, before 1 or 2 weeks, we need to avoid the NSAIDs or anticoagulants. But if they're like a mandatory thing, tell the person who are taking anticoagulants, NSAIDs, and those people, we need to tell that a bruise is an inevitable thing, and it will reduce over a period of time. So we just explain about the bruise, and it will happen, and try to pressure that point and tell them to apply ice immediately. If it is not going, we can go for the bruise treatment also.
We're getting a lot of questions. I think we'll take a few more. We have a question from Astha, who asks how to handle infraorbital lines and lateral forehead lines.
Yeah, infraorbital lines, I told, no, if you see, infraorbital line is like a person's choice, because it's an off-label indication, and as such it's very difficult to treat by dermatologist, because if you give only 2 points just here, just below the mid-pupillary, it may exaggerate that infraorbital fat parts. So just giving the bottom is not going to solve the issue. We have to combine the treatment with other like fillers, all those things, depending upon the facial anatomy. And coming to the lateral forehead lines, I explained in my presentation, some people after the frontalis injection, they will clearly see some lines just extending above the lateral point. because maybe because in some people, if you see in some people frontalis will extend complete forehead, so even before just behind the temporal fusion lines also, especially in the males, those type of people, if you give only target in the middle part, some lines will be present at the lateral part. So if you those type of people, you can call after 2 weeks. If you see, if you are able to appreciate those lines just above the end, always confine about 2 centimeters above the superior orbital rim, give near to the hairline 1 or 2 minutes in this part in the animation, see the palpate the muzzle, check the lines, and you can give in that part.
Okay. That is great. I think Dr. Ramani had also asked something very similar, where they asked, does it help to relieve puffy eyes and also for sagging face due to age?
Puffy eyes is a very vague term actually, because puffy eyes has many it has many reasons for the puffy eyes. So we can't treat only with a botulinum. And one more, sagging face, yes, we can treat in the upper part, but lower face we need to combine with the fillers.
Okay. We have a question on YouTube which has come from Dr. Manjusha, has asked if you have treated unequal eyebrows and unequal smile.
Unequal eyebrows and unequal smile. Can you explain,
Yeah.
Dr. Priyam?
So the question that has come is just about, have you treated them, unequal eyebrows or unequal smile?
I have not treated, but I have seen if you sometimes what happens if you treat frontalis, some asymmetry will happen regarding the eyebrows. That time you can call them back, and after 2 weeks you can correct those little asymmetry. If you see high elevation on one side and low on one side, you can just give on the wherever if you see that high elevation, that point you can give 1 or 2 units so that to just lower down that part.
I think some questions have been sent to Dr. Shetty also, I think, or maybe having mic issue, I think, or we are having questions on multiple forums. So I'll just continue. There are some on YouTube that have been asked to us. What do you do if ptosis occurs?
What do you do if
ptosis?
Yeah, that's why I told no, ptosis is an inevitable thing. So ptosis cannot be reversible. So counsel the patient that is a temporary thing, and if it is not going to reduce and if it is very, very prominent and very visible, tell them to use the mydriatic agents, that is such as phenylephrine 2 to 3 times a day for 2 to 2 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks it will subside.
Okay. I think
always counseling is very, very important.
I think we'll take just one last question that we have. What are the storage guidelines of the toxin after reconstitution?
After reconstitution, better to give within 4 hours, and that is the best thing, because the efficacy, as the time progresses, the efficacy will decrease, because according to some studies, one study, that is 5-year botulinum toxin, if you see in that one, there is 60% of decrease in the efficacy after 6 hours of reconstitution. There is almost 70 to 80% loss of efficacy after 1 or 2 weeks of the reconstitution. So always give within 4 hours, but the best efficacy will be within the 4 hours only.
Okay. Well, one more question had come is, what about botulinum toxin for nasal flare?
Yeah, nasal flare.
I think we're having some issues with the video. Just hold on for a second. I will. Try to. I think Dr. Reddy has had some issue right now with the video. So, yeah, just going to wait for a moment and try to fix the issue.
Dr. Priyam, what I suggest, if doctor is not able to connect, it was the last question actually.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll hand over the session to Mr. Pankaj. So that is the better way.
Yeah, I think let's do that. So when doctor's video restores, we will thank her. For now, I hand over the session to Mr. Pankaj,
Yes.
who
Thank
spoke
you.
to you
Thank you.
earlier.
Thank you very much. I would like to really thank you as well as Dr. Shabba Reddy for taking us through this enlightening session on botulinum toxin. And I would like to take just few seconds of your valuable time, all the delegates, to share with you some information about our products. Gufic Biosciences, as you know, enjoy the trust of a specialist since 1970 and is known for innovation and serving super specialist doctor. Gufic markets its wide range of products not only in India but also in the international markets. Gufic Amsterdam, in collaboration with Prime Bio USA, has proudly introduced Stenox, botulinum toxin type A in two strengths, 50 IU and 100 IU injections for stunning looks. Dr. Stenox is manufactured as per stringent quality standards of British and European pharmacopoeia in biosafety level 3 manufacturing facilities. Gufic Biosciences manufactured botulinum toxin for the first time in India in collaboration with Prime Bio USA, which is headed by Dr. Balram Singh, a renowned expert in research and development of botulinum toxin. And Stenox results were found to be at par with all international brands because Stenox is manufactured with virus-free purified Hall strains using best quality bioassay from Prime Bio USA. Quality of each and every batch of Stenox is tested every 3 months to ensure consistency. Stenox has an appearance of clear thin formulation due to latest manufacturing technology used. And moreover, Stenox was found to be stable up to 3 months when stored at 25 degrees Celsius before reconstitution. It is only because of this technological superiority, biological potency of Stenox was found to be at par with international brands. And not only that, users of Stenox injections have shared positive feedbacks like clear results, smooth to use efficacy, resulting in repeat purchase from our esteemed customers. In addition to Stenox, Gufic Amsterdam is marketing a wide range of formulations, especially for skin aging, dry skin, hyperpigmentation, as well as unique sunscreen formulations. On behalf of Gufic Amsterdam, look forward to your valuable and continuous patronage for our products. Thank you very much. Now I will request Mr. Sanjay Oswal, our General Manager, Sales, to thank the delegates. Mr. Sanjay Oswal?
Yeah, fine. My video is has been stopped. Can we make it on?
You are visible, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, thank you, Pankaj. It was genuinely a very good webinar on today's topic, effective uses of botulinum toxin. And for this, I would like to thank our today's speaker, Dr. Shobha Reddy from Hyderabad. Stenox is the brand of our botulinum toxin. And as rightly shared by my colleague Pankaj, that it is technologically speaking and efficacy wise, Stenox is very well accepted by many doctors in India since the day we have launched from March 2021. And we have also received repeat purchase for Stenox from some doctors in the span of only 2 months of its launch. We are very much sure that Stenox will hit the botulinum toxin market very strongly, and many doctors would be happy using our brand. To inform you all, we would be arranging another interesting webinar in which many new insights would be unveiled to you, and which will also further sharpen your academic skills in your field, which again will be brought to you by Gufic's Amsterdam division. I would like to thank our President, Gufic, Dr. Debesh Das, Mr. Rasik Kulkarni, our Associate Vice President, and our entire marketing and IT team and medical team for arranging today's webinar. And more importantly, I would be thanking all the participants and delegates who took time to attend this webinar arranged by Gufic Biosciences and making it a successful scientific program. Thank you once again.